Washington lied to you. It is that simple. There is no polite way to say this anymore. For years, the people in charge, the foreign policy establishment, the Blob, the talking heads on CNN and in the New York Times looked you dead in the eye and told you a fairy tale. They told you that Russia was gasping for air. They told you that the Russian economy was a gas station masquerading as a country, and that with one more sanctions package, one more seizing of assets, the whole house of cards would come tumbling down. They told you that Vladimir Putin was isolated, sick, and on the verge of being overthrown by his own people. They told you that the Russian military was fighting with shovels and stealing washing machines because they had run out of chips. They were wrong. And they weren't just a little bit wrong, they were catastrophically, criminally wrong. We are now in November 2025. Look around you. Does Russia look like it is collapsing? The Russian Federation is not only standing, it is stronger, harder, and more dangerous today than it was when this tragedy started in 2022. The enemy is inside the gates, and the West is the one looking at a broken future. President Trump is back in the White House. He won on a promise to end the wars, to stop the bleeding, to put America first. But let me be very clear about the situation he has walked into. Trump has not inherited a fixable problem. He has inherited a geopolitical graveyard. The previous administration, driven by liberal delusions and a complete inability to understand realism, has handed him a poisoned chalice. The Blob spent the last 4 years burning every bridge, destroying every off-ramp, and wasting every ounce of American leverage. Trump wants to cut a deal. He wants to use the art of the deal to settle the conflict in Eastern Europe. With what? Negotiations are based on leverage. You need a stick or a carrot. The United States currently has neither. The Russians aren't looking for an off-ramp anymore. Why would they? They are winning on the battlefield. They have adapted, they have mobilized, and they have watched as the West emptied its armories and destroyed its own credibility. The window for a good deal, or even a face-saving deal, closed 2 years ago while Washington was busy patting itself on the back for its moral superiority. You have to understand the magnitude of the economic miscalculation. This will go down in history as one of the greatest unforced errors in great power politics. The conventional wisdom in Washington, London, and Brussels was that the West controlled the global financial nervous system. They believed that by weaponizing the dollar, cutting off SWIFT, and sanctioning the Russian central bank, they could bring a nuclear-armed great power to its knees without firing a shot. This was a delusion of the highest order. It ignored the basic structure of the global economy in the 21st century. It ignored the existence of China. It ignored India. It ignored the global south. What actually happened? The sanctions didn't destroy Russia. They inoculated Russia. They acted as a massive protectionist wall that forced the Russian state to reindustrialize. While the West was obsessed with financial services, ESG scores, and the green transition, the Russians were forced to build things, real things, tanks, artillery, drones, microchips. They reoriented their entire economy away from the West and toward the East. We pushed them to do exactly what they needed to do to become independent of our pressure. We gave them no choice but to build a war economy. And now, in late 2025, that war economy is humming. Russia is producing more artillery shells in a single month than the entire NATO alliance can produce in a year. Think about the implications of that. The West deindustrialized. We outsourced our industrial base to China and turned our own economies into service-based models. Russia went to a war footing. The result was inevitable. You cannot fight a war of attrition with GDP numbers or stock market valuations. Wars are won by logistics, manpower, and industrial depth. Wars are won by who can put more steel on the target. The Blob forgot the mathematics of violence. They thought they could win a media war. They thought that if they put enough Ukrainian flags in their Twitter bios, the Russians would pack up and go home. But the Russians don't care about Twitter. They care about the balance of power on the ground. And that brings us to the military reality. The tragedy of what happened to the Ukrainian forces is something that history will judge harshly. The West encouraged them to fight a conventional war against a superior artillery power. We promised them weapons that arrived too late in numbers too small to make a strategic difference. We gave them just enough to bleed, but never enough to win. If winning was even possible, which I have argued for years, it was not. We led them down the garden path. We told them they were part of the West, that NATO had their back, and now in 2025, as the front lines crumble and the manpower shortages become critical, what is the West doing? We are exhausted. Our stockpiles are empty. The German military is a hollow shell. The British military is shrinking. The American military is overstretched from the Red Sea to the South China Sea. President Trump is looking at the readiness reports right now. He sees the truth that the media won't report. The United States Navy is shrinking. We cannot build ships fast enough to keep up with retirement, let alone keep up with China. We cannot supply a high-intensity war in Europe and simultaneously deter a conflict in Asia. The math does not work. And this brings me to the most catastrophic aspect of this entire failure, the China alignment. For decades, realists like myself have warned that the single most important strategic goal for the United States must be to prevent a hegemon from dominating Asia. China is the only peer competitor we face. China is the threat. To contain China, you need Russia. You don't have to like Russia. You don't have to like Putin. But in the ruthless world of international anarchy, you need to balance against the strongest power. Russia shares a massive border with China. They are natural competitors. Instead of peeling Russia away from China, the Biden administration and the foreign policy establishment did the exact opposite. They adopted a policy of dual containment. They decided to try and crush Russia and contain China at the same time. This was strategic suicide. It is geopolitics 101. Do not push two great powers together. By treating Russia as an existential enemy, we drove them straight into the arms of Beijing. We forced them to become allies. Now look at the result. We have created a Eurasian bloc. Russia provides the limitless natural resources, the oil, the gas, the food, the minerals, and the battle-hardened military experience. China provides the industrial capacity, the technology, the dual-use components, and the capital. They are backing each other. When we sanction Russia, China buys their oil. When we threaten China, Russia provides them with missile technology. We have unified the Eurasian heartland against us. Sir Halford Mackinder, the father of geopolitics, warned about this over a century ago. He said that whoever controls the world island Eurasia commands the world. We have handed the world island to our adversaries on a silver platter. President Trump understands this. He knows that the real game is in Asia. He wants to pivot. He wants to focus on the trade imbalance with Beijing. But he is tethered to a disaster in Europe that he cannot easily escape. The Blob has tied Gulliver down with 1,000 ropes. If Trump tries to cut a deal now, Putin will demand terms that look like a capitulation for the West. He will demand neutrality for Ukraine. He will demand the rollback of NATO infrastructure. He will demand the lifting of sanctions. And because the West has no leverage, Trump might have to swallow that bitter pill. But even if he does, the damage is done. The trust is gone. The Russians will not trust an American promise ever again. They have seen agreements torn up. They have seen assets seized. They have decided that their future lies with the global South, with BRICS, and with China. The rules-based international order that the liberals love to talk about is dead. It died in the mud of the Donbass. It died when we weaponized the dollar and told the world that if you cross Washington, we will steal your money. The rest of the world watched that. Saudi Arabia watched, India watched, Brazil watched, and they started moving away from the dollar. They started trading in their own currencies. We accelerated the decline of our own financial hegemony. This is the grim reality of November 2025. The United States is $36 trillion in debt. Our society is polarized. Our military is tired. Our industrial base is atrophied, and our rivals are stronger, more unified, and more confident than they have been in decades. The mainstream media will try to spin this. They will try to blame Trump for the mess he inherited. They will try to tell you that Ukraine is still standing, as if mere survival is a victory when the country has been wrecked. But do not be fooled. Structural realism tells us that states seek survival above all else. Russia viewed NATO expansion as an existential threat. They acted to eliminate that threat. We thought we could bluff them. We thought we could sanction them into submission. We failed. The unipolar moment, that brief period after 1991 when the United States could do whatever it wanted, wherever it wanted, without consequence, is over. It is officially history. We are now living in a multipolar world, a dangerous world where other great powers have the ability to say no to the United States. President Trump has a monumental task ahead of him. He has to manage this decline. He has to try to salvage the American position without triggering World War III. But he is playing a losing hand. The Blob gambled the American empire on a proxy war in Eastern Europe, and they lost. They told you Russia would collapse. Russia didn't collapse. The credibility of the West collapsed. And now we all have to live in the wreckage they left behind. Washington led us down the garden path. They poked the bear. They ignored the balance of power. And now the bill has come due. It is not a happy story, but it is the truth. And in a world of lies, the truth is the only weapon we have left.